Hi, my name is Reverend Clown, and I'd like to welcome you to Reverend's Believe It or Not. Today we're going to talk about gemstones appearing from heaven. There's been lots of controversy over this, and I was meditating on it one day, and I was saying, Lord, I really like to know what it is about stones, why the Bible talks about stones and gemstones all the way through, why there's gemstones and precious stones appearing in people's hands and on the floor, and I'd like to know more about it. And I remember that a couple of years ago, a ministry, people that I know that are personal friends, have gone through our church, and they had gemstones falling when they were ministering, and they showed some of them to us, diamonds, and I think they were all diamonds, and they let us see them and told us about them and how they appeared and in their ministry. And also heard on YouTube and GodTube some stories of people in Mexico with gemstones appearing in their hands and gemstones appearing. And then there's Bill Johnson's ministry, who also I know have had somehow ministries related to them. I'm not sure quite who or what, but they've had gemstones stories. People come through their ministry that have had stories of gemstones. So I wanted to know more about what was actually happening and what the Bible says about it, because everything that happens, you have to go to the Bible as the basics. Now, it's not going to happen exactly the same. The Bible says that all the things that Jesus did were not written in it because the books couldn't even contain it. So everything has to point to Jesus, okay? Everything has to point to Jesus, not to a statue or to a religion or a saint or someone dead, but to Jesus, not to angels. Has to all point to Jesus. Okay, so I wanted to know what exactly the Bible said about precious stones, and what will cause them to appear. And so let's go to the Word and take a look at that. First of all, let's look at Ezekiel 28. And Ezekiel is right before Daniel. Okay, it says, now this is talking about Lucifer. Lucifer, we believe that Lucifer was the head worship leader in heaven, because they called him the anointed cherub, and he had timbrels, timbrels, I'm not very good at words, and pipes, which are musical instruments, were built right into him. Okay, it also says, you were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in the Garden of Eden. Every precious stone was your covering. And then it names all the precious stones here. It says, you were the anointed cherub that covers. And it says, you walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. So there's another thing that has to do with stones. And you come down in 16 at the end of 16 at the end of that verse, from the midst of the fiery stones. So they're talking about fiery stones. Now, just starting off right here, all the other research I did I'll tell you about, but it comes back to here. When the priests were given instructions to wear priestly garments, and they were made of precious, and it had 12 precious stones on the very front of their garment, and each stone represented a different tribe, and they were precious stones, and they were big precious stones. And the priest's job was to do the sacrifices and for praise and prophecy, for worship. The priest's job was sacrifice and worship. And so we see that precious stones seems to come back to always having to do with something to do with worship, with worshiping God. Whether it was the priests on the priestly garments, or whether it was on Lucifer, who was originally the worship leader in heaven before he rebelled and was kicked out. Or if you look in Genesis 13:22, it had to do with the covenant and the blessing. It had to do with every time something that the Israelites wanted to remember, they would take a stone as a monument, and they would pour oil over it, or they would pile stones on top of each other as a monument. So those weren't precious stones as far as value goes as being gemstones, but there again, stones is something familiar, something that is important. It's a memorial. So we see stones in the Bible as being a memorial to point to Jesus, to remember events that have to do with Jesus. We see them as tools used to cover the garments of the priest, which included praise and worship and sacrifice. We see them covering Lucifer before he became Satan, the fallen angel, the god of this earth. And they were his covering. We see stones in heaven, the fiery stones that the angel Lucifer walked on before he was thrown out of heaven. We also see the law of God, the Ten Commandments, written on stone. And in Exodus 24 and 10, let's take a look at that. Exodus 24 and 10. Let's see, is that correct? 24:10, yeah. Okay, and they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet as it were paved, as a paved work of sapphire stones. So the throne of God, or they're talking about God here, was like the very heavens in its clarity. Okay, so sapphire stones, a whole road, a whole paved something made out of sapphires. And that's not the only place. There's other places where it talks about paved, about sapphires around the throne of God. 126. Okay. And above the firmaments over their heads was likeness of the throne in appearance like sapphire, a stone, like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. And they're talking about one of Ezekiel's visions of heaven. So there is, in heaven is sapphires, a precious stone of sapphire. So apparently God likes sapphires, or sapphire has a particular meaning to him. Let's see here. We're also like jewels in crowns. That talks about precious stones, jasper, crystal, and so on, that the bride will be adorned. There again, precious stones. Revelations 21:19, the foundation of works adorned with all kinds of precious stones and pure gold. Okay, so in heaven they have precious stones, and it has to do with worship. It has to do with the throne. It has to do with most of it seems as though it has to do with worship with God. Ezekiel 54:11, lay your stones of colorful gems and foundations with sapphires, rubies, crystal, gates, and all the walls have precious stones in them. That is a description of heaven. That's Isaiah 54:11. And Zechariah 9:16 says that we are jewels of a crown. The flock of his people are jewels as of a crown. We are living stones built up in a spiritual house to offer up spiritual sacrifices, and that we are royal priesthood, that we would proclaim the praises of him. So there again, it goes back to worship. So I believe, from what God's shown me, that precious gemstones from heaven will become a more and more common things in these end times. I believe as you begin to worship, you're bringing heaven's atmosphere down on you. God says that he inhabits the praises of his people. In about 4 different places he talks and says in different ways that he inhabits the praises of his people. And when you're praising and worshiping, you're bringing the glory of God down. And that means that everything that is in heaven around the throne might be coming with you. Sometimes people have seen all kinds of like gold dust, precious stones put in their hands, precious stones around them, all kinds of things like that. And I personally believe that it is from God, because it always points toward God, and it always has to do with worship and worshiping from your heart. You can look up these scriptures that I've given them yourself and pray about it, but I believe it's going to become more and more common, and it's going to be more and more normal things, just like the appearances of angels are going to become more and more common. The atmosphere of heaven, people being healed, just all kinds of miraculous things. And these are things that are supposed to take place in our everyday life. But as far as gemstones from heaven goes and what the Bible says about it, that's all that we're going to talk about today on that subject. And I hope you have a blessed day, and that's it for today. And we're out.